Picture this. World leaders are lining up against Donald Trump, and they're not just talking, they're preparing for war. Right now, Greenland is at the center of a covert military operation. Troops from Germany, France, Norway, Sweden. Do you know what they're doing? They're all heading to Greenland for joint military exercises against the United States, preparing for what they fear could be a U.S.-led invasion. It sounds like something out of a political thriller, right? But here's the catch. This isn't a story. This is real. And it's not just about military strategy. It's about a global shift that could change everything. What happens when the world's most powerful country starts losing its allies? What happens when nations begin to make their own moves, even against the U.S.? Stick with me, because what you're about to learn will completely change the way you see the global stage and why this should matter to you. This isn't just a random military exercise. This is a direct challenge to the U.S., a sign that the world is shifting in a way that could leave America isolated. But why now? What's really going on beneath the surface? Let's break it down. These aren't just countries sending troops to Greenland. They're sending a message that says we're prepared for what comes next. And here's the thing. This isn't just about Greenland. It's part of a much larger trend. Europe, Asia, even Latin America are shifting alliances, all quietly preparing for what many believe could be an inevitable conflict. The question isn't if the U.S. will face a global challenge, it's when. And what happens to you when that happens? When the alliances that America relied on for decades start to crumble, what's the real cost of a divided world, and who will end up on the winning side? You might think this is just another political stunt, but let me hit you with something harder. This is more than just talk. This is real, and it's already unfolding. French President Emmanuel Macron, back in 2025, was all about diplomacy, trying to buy time, trying to avoid conflict. Fast forward to 2026, and his tone has completely changed. Now he's saying it loud and clear. We need to make them fear us. We need to act faster, stronger. That's a stark contrast to the appeasement we saw just a year ago. And what does this tell us? Europe is preparing for a serious confrontation with the U.S. What's missing here? No one is talking about the cost of that shift. What happens when these alliances solidify into something far more aggressive? Because once these forces are on the ground, there's no turning back. Here's where things get intense. This isn't just a small shift. It's a dramatic escalation that mirrors what happened in history. Look back to the Cold War. We saw similar movements when Europe started to distrust the U.S. and align themselves more closely with their own interests. But now it's happening again, except the stakes are much higher. We're talking about military forces from multiple nations positioning themselves not for defense, but for potential aggression. And what's the U.S. doing? The administration is doubling down, calling for more military presence, more tariffs, more everything. But here's the thing. They're pushing so hard, they're normalizing a level of global tension that should be unthinkable. A world where countries are actively preparing for a U.S. invasion, that's not normal, and it shouldn't be. But it doesn't stop there. Now, let's talk about the real kicker, the contradictions. Donald Trump, the face of U.S. foreign policy, has openly said that he might tariff countries that don't support the U.S. in its quest for Greenland. He said it, I may put a 25% tariff on countries that don't support us. And that's just the start. There's no denying it now. Trump is willing to burn relationships, alienate allies, and risk global economic collapse just to get Greenland. It doesn't matter that Denmark is offering everything the U.S. wants, military positioning, resources, everything. Trump's pushing for more, and it's not just about Greenland anymore. It's about making sure the U.S. dominates. But why? Here's the part nobody's saying out loud. This isn't just a grab for land. This is about power, ego, and the dangerous games leaders play when they think they're untouchable. Now, the pressure is mounting, and fast. First, you've got Trump pushing for an economic chokehold, threatening countries with tariffs if they don't align with his Greenland strategy. Second, you've got the growing military presence in Greenland, with nations like Germany, France, and Sweden all preparing for the worst. And third, the U.S. is now so isolated that even Canada, one of its closest allies, is making huge moves to partner with China, a country that's openly challenging American power. All this, it's not a coincidence. It's a storm of crises stacking on top of each other. And here's the question. What happens if this continues? If the U.S. keeps isolating itself and its allies keep slipping away, where does that leave us? One misstep, one escalation, and everything could change. Let's bring this closer to home. This isn't just about military strategy or political games. It's about what you feel. What happens when a country that's supposed to be a beacon of stability starts unraveling at the seams? Look around. Ordinary people in the U.S. are already feeling the effects. You're seeing rising costs, trade wars, and a fractured political landscape that's pushing families into uncertainty. The ripple effects of these global tensions reach every corner of your life, whether it's the economy, job security, or your everyday freedoms. And here's the kicker. Most of this chaos could have been avoided if leadership had focused on the real priorities like improving education, healthcare, and economic security for everyday Americans. If this feels familiar, say so in the comments, because this is what happens when the world watches the U.S. lose its way. Now let's step back and look at the bigger picture. It's easy to get caught up in the chaos of the moment, but there's something more insidious happening. The truth is, this global shift isn't about Trump or any one leader. It's about systems. The mechanisms that allow these escalations to happen are built on fear, power, and spectacle. Leaders manipulate these emotions, using them to leverage power, gain influence, and ultimately shape the world to their will. But here's the unsettling part. This isn't just happening abroad. It's happening right here in the U.S. too. The same forces that drive international tensions are also at play domestically, fueling divisions, playing on fears, and creating an environment where the most vulnerable are left behind. And as the global balance tilts, the U.S. has lost sight of something critical. True leadership isn't about control. It's about collaboration and compromise. When you forget that, you risk everything. So what happens next? There are two possible paths here. On one hand, we could see more isolationism, more division, countries pulling away, the U.S. doubling down on its own agenda, pushing further into conflict. That path leads to more tariffs, more fractured alliances, and an increasingly unstable global landscape. But there's another possibility. The U.S. could find a way to rebuild those bridges, to pivot back toward a world where collaboration and mutual interests reign. But that won't happen overnight. It will take a drastic shift in leadership, a rethinking of priorities, and the courage to act, not just for the moment, but for the long-term future. The question is, which direction will we choose? Because make no mistake, the momentum is already building, whether we're ready or not. This is the point where we need to stop and rethink everything. The global order is shifting, and the United States, for all its might, may be on the wrong side of history. Greenland, it's just a symbol, a metaphor for the bigger picture, one where power is up for grabs and the rules of the game are changing. What if the real threat isn't military, but economic and political? What if the next move isn't about invading land, but losing it to other powers who've already figured out how to work together? The story doesn't end with Greenland. It's already spiraling into new territories, new alliances. The question is, will we be ready when the next turn comes? Stay tuned for more insights. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button for deeper analysis on what's coming next, as the world is changing fast and you need to be informed.